And so we are live.
Good evening and welcome to the grand finale of the PAFI 7th National Forum. We've had very engaging and busy 2 days, and there are so many takeaways from each of these 12 sessions we've had so far. The theme was building trust and charting growth, and on these two pillars, we've had over 70 speakers coming from all over the world. Dr. Jaishankar, Minister of External Affairs, is our chief guest for this session, and he's in talks with Samir, Saran, the president of ORF. And before I invite Virat to formally welcome and take this session forward, I would like to personally thank all the members of PAFI, my fellow colleagues in the management committee, 27 plus sponsors, 17 supporters. This has been quite an experience, and I'd like to specially thank, before I lose the opportunity, my colleague in Internet and Mobile Association, IAMI, and its president, Shubho, and they've done a great job in putting this virtual forum together. Over to you, Virat. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ajay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me great pleasure to introduce a very special guest at PAFI's 7th National Forum concluding session and way forward, the Honorable Minister for External Affairs, Dr. Jaishankar. Dr. Jaishankar is not only an eminent diplomat, but also a distinguished author, thinker, someone who's always been ahead of his time, a change agent. And now, in his new role in Avatar, a much sought after global political practitioner whose views in geopolitics are not only important, but considered necessary. His very distinguished career over nearly 4 decades in the Foreign Service. He served in over 12 countries. The height of his career, and Dr. Jaishankar has served as the High Commissioner of Singapore and an ambassador to 3 countries, including 2 of India's most strategically important trade partners and allies, China and United States. He capped his bureaucratic career as the Foreign Secretary of India. In 2019, he was conferred the prestigious Padma Shri Award. And after experiencing corporate sector at the very highest levels, he reinvented himself again in 2019. Some would call it homecoming. The Honorable Minister was appointed as the External Affairs Minister by Prime Minister Shri Modi. During his 38-year-old hectic professional life was in progress, he found the time to hold a breath, help negotiate the US-India civil nuclear agreement, lead relief operations following the 2004 Indian tsunami, conclude the 2005 new defense framework, and help with the launch of not 1, but 3 dialogues, the US-India Energy Dialogue, the India-US Economic Dialogue, and the India-US CEO Forum. As if that was not enough, he found time on the side to write an extraordinary book titled The India Way, Strategies for an Uncertain Future. World, released in 2020. This book is both timely and important. For those who have read the book and will recognize that the wisdom contained in this seminal work. A reviewer aptly described this book as impeccably measured, intelligently analyzed, and invigorately researched work. More important, the book talks about uncertainty, and it comes at a time where there's nothing more uncertain in the last 2 decades than 2020 itself. So his book comes at a time when the world and India are transitioning through an unprecedented moment in history. The book is a masterpiece of statecraft and a handbook for all policy professionals who support the work of business and believe in the promise of India. Thank you, sir, for building bridges and allowing us to walk miles, create trusted friends and allies, and seamless networks of global support. May I also mention that from personal experience, the Honorable Minister is incredibly forward-leaning and friendly attitude towards the business. I can go on and on, but you're here to listen to him and understand his worldviews and where India fits in, especially on geopolitics and how business fits in the middle of that. Moderating the session with him today is my dear friend and very distinguished Dr. Samir Saran, President of ORF. As a predominantly business audience who's deeply interested in policy work, it will be a great pleasure to hear the Honorable Minister's views on a topic that comes naturally to him. What can India's foreign policy do to drive business, jobs, and GDP? What can business do to assist with India's foreign policy? and how can we all work together, especially in the post-COVID world in 2021 and onwards. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Honorable Minister for External Affairs, Dr. S. Jaishankar, and with him, Dr. Samir Saran. Thank you.
Thank you, Virat, for a very intense week of discussions. I think PAFI has done a great job by bringing very important voices to India, and we have all gained from these past few days. And I'm sure what we are going to hear in the next 45 minutes is going to help us shape our own works, our own outlooks, and certainly our worldview. Dr. Jaishankar, Honorable Minister, I can tell you at the outset that there's one question I will not ask about, and that is on China. Over the past months, you have replied to this question in many forums in pretty much the same vein. And since your replies have been so consistent, people are trying to find deeper meaning in those replies, sometimes perhaps complicating your own assessment. And I don't want to add to your complications by asking you again about China, but there's plenty to talk about besides the Himalayan saga. And I think Virat has given us a cue on the way forward. That's where I'm going to focus on. So with your permission, Mr. Minister, I would like to take off from where Virat left and ask you the most important question of 2020 for you as the foreign minister. What are the foreign policy learnings from this year, from 2020, from the pandemic? What does it tell you about the world that we live in? And certainly, what does it tell you about what we need to do to succeed in this world?
Well, first of all, let me begin by saying it's a great pleasure to address the PAFI meeting, even if it is virtual, and good to see you all. Thank you, Ajay. Thank you, Virat. And Samir, I can't think of a better person to have a conversation with on the state of the world. So let me start with that question. And by the way, thank you for showing that restraint on the subject you mentioned, because I think, as you say, people have started to tell me what they think I mean, which they seem to think they know better than me. But anyway, put that aside. So here's the point. Look, we are today more than 10 years after the 2008-2009 global financial crisis. And looking back a decade after that, it's very clear that it was a very major shift in the global power distribution. Okay, and it was expressed in different ways. One of which was that the G7 and G7, G8 became the G20. Certainly, it was a big inflection point for China, in China's rise. For us too, I mean, obviously the economy took a hit, but finally, when you looked at it in the overall global sense, it was certainly in the distribution of power we came out ahead. And today, people would be surprised to know that at the G7 meetings before that, we actually used India and China used to be invited as a kind of a attendee in a single session, a side session. We were not even on the the main table, as it were. So it tells you a decade later how much the world has changed. Now, why am I saying this to you? If someone looks, maybe not a decade, even 5 years later, at 2020, and ask themselves, so what did 2020 do? Okay, I don't have the answer today, but I can tell you, they will all say, I'm pretty sure of this, that it was a very big year, that it was a year the world changed. A lot of forces, a lot of trends which were already there went forward, new things happened. And when we look at the uncertainties which 2020 has actually increased, to my mind, the two phenomena which were unfolding, which was the multipolarity in the world, which means really a much broader distribution or shareholding, if you would, and the rebalancing, which means the weightage of players was also changing along with that. Those will both clearly increase. But what does it mean to us at home and in foreign policy? I think if we are to come through the challenges of 2020, like every other country, we will obviously be focused on economic recovery. Like many big countries, and certainly those who are impacted in this particular way, we would be looking at more resilient economies, more resilient supply chains, and I know that's been a subject of discussions. But I would also say for India, this is also a moment to actually increase, do deep reforms. That it's not enough to recover, it's not enough to look for a more resilient world. I think if you have to make crisis into opportunity, this is a moment of change when the society, the polity should be more open, and I think is much more open to reforms. And we've seen some big reforms in the last few weeks. Agriculture is one example, labor is one example, even education is a case to point. So I would say a big inflection point. How much it would make a difference to us in the long run, still not clear. It will unfold. A lot of it will depend on the choices we make. Are we willing to bite the bullet in different areas? But again, I would argue that if you look at what the government's been doing this year, we've been sort of steady. We've handled the pandemic. In fact, again, if you look at the response to the pandemic itself, I see two big pluses, two takeaways there. One is the social discipline with which the people of India approached this. And I've said this before, I see more people wearing masks in India than I see in most other parts of the world. And to me, it's an extraordinary, situation. And the second is the capability response we've seen. The PPEs, the masks, the ventilators, the testing kits, the vaccines which await us. So we will come out of this stronger, I have no doubt, but I would like to be ambitious in coming out of it, not just want to get back my place.
So maybe just as a follow-up, we will take a part of what Virat posed to you right at the very beginning, with respect to how can you see businesses supporting foreign policy or government initiatives more broadly, and how will diplomacy how will it reorient itself, in response to this challenge, this humongous challenge the pandemic has posed. As a diplomat, how will you have to be different?
So look, I think as a foreign minister, as a diplomat, businesses mean different things to me. Okay. At its most fundamental level, they are employment creators. They are the people who keep, the country, the livelihood of the country going. So in that sense, they are organizers or creators of employment, who then sort of, aggregate the efforts of people and sort of take you into the marketplace and give you a capability to play. And today we all accept the concept of what is called comprehensive national power. That power is not, the metric of power is not military power. It need not again be just diplomatic skill, but a lot of it is your economic strengths, finance, trade, investment, connectivity, data, technology. These are the more contemporary metrics of power. And businesses can make a very, very big difference here. The second part of it is, I would say, the nature of relationships with countries, which is that, when business goes out or business facilitates, international relations coming in, they are a player in the arena. So anybody in foreign policy or diplomacy would harness the activities of business, and clearly for me, a much more active, vibrant, confident Indian business is a very good partner to have. And the third, I would say, is branding. I mean, if you look at the branding of India in the last 25 years, a lot of that is we get the benefits of a sense of India which sometimes business activities in foreign countries too. I mean, sometimes it can be a business branding, sometimes it can, this this sense of India today as India is a tech country, that, or as I hope, that the sense of being a pharmacy of the world. At the end of the day, we supplied medicines to 150 countries during COVID. Okay, more than half of them were grants that we gave them. Now, if you look, this was a business contribution because a set of businesses in India produced that. We took advantage of it. We used that to build bridges. But as a result, we have today built a branding, strengthened our branding as the pharmacy of the world. So for me, having that as a partner is a very important part of the overall scheme of things.
So, there is a degree of Indian skepticism around trading relations of the past. Vulnerable supply chains is the word that we hear often. Weaponization of global value chains is again a term that is often used. Paradoxically, some would argue that India now needs more of trade. It needs more of these interlinkages. It needs to be more deeply integrated into these value production endeavors. How do you reconcile this Indian skepticism with global value chains? And of course, the need to be more present in more parts of the world. How does Atmanirbharta and our international opportunities, in some sense, move together?
Look, I don't think that the mainstream skepticism about international trade, about some aspects of international trade, were based on the fact that international trade per se was somehow negative or detrimental to our interests. I think the skepticism was the manner in which negotiations were conducted, outcomes were generated, arrangements were arrived at, and what was its impact on the domestic economy. Now, the fact is, if you looked at, I would say particularly the last about 15 years or so, what have we seen? I'm talking to an audience which is primarily a business audience. I don't have to tell anybody out there that manufacturing in India has actually struggled to deal with cheap imports which have come from outside. Often, imports which have been encouraged by market distortions and in some cases by non-market factors. So the issue is not, it's not a, black and white, should you have international trade, that's good or bad. It is what is the manner of international trade, what are the terms of international trade. And if I were to sort of sum up the problem in a way, and I'm not blaming anybody outside India. Let me be very clear. I think we made choices, we made calculations. And I think we were driven by what I would call an L1 mentality. I get the most competitive price. So, as in a sort of a bureaucratic process sense, you say, well, L1 is good, let me take that. And as a business sense, often people would take an L1 because it would obviously, give you better margins in the overall numbers. But the fact is, if you conduct life as an L1 exercise, you will actually end up very often affecting your own capabilities because there's an L1 sitting outside who is using their advantages and their system, sometimes to game yours. And really, you get hollowed out in different areas. So I would actually argue we should have a V1 mentality, which is we look at value. To me, if I had a choice between two outcomes, one of which creates employment in India, one of which creates downstream industries in India, which supports innovation in India, which actually gives me size and scale in India, I would choose that over L. I think I would take this debate not as a trade, do we do foreign trade, do we not do foreign trade, do we do FTA, do we not do FTA. I think it's an L1, V1 kind of issue. And at the end of the day, if you look at people who've done well in Asia, the big manufacturing powers, they've all built their domestic industry. They have strong, most of them, their MSME sectors have grown as the economy grew. They didn't take a hit because the economy grew. The purpose of doing more trade, the trade should not be at the cost of domestic economy. Trade should actually expand the arena for the domestic economy. So I think it's a question of intelligent, sensible, strategic management of our trade strategy.
So we have a hard stop at 7:29 or 7:28, as we heard. I would request all who are online to start posting their questions, and I will try to integrate them into the conversation with the Honorable Minister as we proceed over the next 20-25 minutes. We heard about the word L1, and we heard about V1, but between L and V, there is another alphabet I want to quiz you on. It's called Q. Some voices to our north suggest that Minister Jaishankar is part of an exercise to build an Asian NATO, the Quad. How would you respond to that? And although I try to read up and read a little bit on foreign policy, what is the Quad? How should we, as people who are in businesses, people who are in different sectors, assess the emergence of this phenomena called Quad?
Well, I go back. First of all, by the way, you said you wouldn't ask me questions on China, but I find that you found a way of coming around. But that's okay. Now, what I began by laying out was the direction the world was moving in. And the direction the world is moving in is a more multipolar world. I use the word multipolar. What it means in plain English is there are many more countries who have the ability to influence and shape outcomes. And part of it is that, there's been a relative change in the position and power of the United States, a difference in which the West collectively perceives itself. It's less collective than it used to be. A change clearly in the importance, the power of China. I mean, the rise of China is the big geopolitical event of our lifetimes. Much more activity from Russia, and in many ways, much more regional. I would say regional solutions to regional problems. I mean, this is the world we are seeing. Now, what was the world before? The world before was a world which was, in some ways, much greater American dominance, supported by a strong Western bloc support for America. Now, the world before that was a Cold War world, where there were two blocs, and the two blocs would try and push everybody in the world to choose between them. A few of us, like India, did not make that option. Now, every landscape produces its own sort of thinking and its own strategy. So when you had a Cold War and the pressure to choose, you had a phenomenon like non-alignment, okay, which is I will not choose between the two of you. I'll keep my options open. When we had American dominance and Western dominance, at that time you had strategic autonomy, which was in key areas of nuclear, of economy, of trade. I will not be pressurized to compromise my basic interests. I have that capability on strategic issues of being autonomous of the dominant sector. Today, multipolar world will also create its own logic. Now, if there are more players out there, then clearly you can't have strategic autonomy in a multipolar world, because strategic autonomy is against a dominant player. Okay? You don't have non-alignment because there are no caps. The underlying idea is not different. The underlying idea is still an independent India. I mean, there's a consistent, but the independent India will express itself very differently, and that is today in an example like Quad. Quad is not the only example where four countries find it useful to consult on issues which are in their common interest. There are issues like maritime security, how to respond to humanitarian assistance, disaster relief situations, connectivity, issues like say counterterrorism, now resilient supply chains. So these are four countries who say, okay, our interests converge. We have the basis to do business with each other. So I would say it's very much in keeping with times, and we will find increasingly in a multipolar world and a more fractured world, I would say, these ad hoc combinations of countries who will work together. And by the way, since we have so many agendas, as we become bigger, we will have areas where we will work with other countries. I mean, if you look 20 years ago, this was a time when the West was very, very dominant. You had three countries who felt they had a common interest today in working together to, to strengthen the hand vis-a-vis the West. The three countries were Russia, India, and China. So before there was a quad, there was a triangle. So, it's not an entirely novel proposition, but I would suggest to you that a more multipolar world will create,
So
this is future.
in the last few weeks, you would have done a foreign ministers meeting of RICS, of RIC, you would have done a foreign minister meeting of Quad, and you would have done a foreign minister meeting of BRICS.
And SCO.
And SCO.
Shanghai Coop and IPSA.
And
That's another triangle. That's India, Brazil, South Africa, which is a democratic, three democratic developing.
Democracy.
Yeah, sure. I also did a few others. I've done SARC and etc. But the plurilaterals, you might say kind of voluntary, non-structured kind of meetings. It would be RIC, it would be IPSA, it would be Quad. Those are the kinds of meetings.
So, but just extending this conversation, you talked about the emergence of plurilateralism and these new flexible arrangements like Quad. The fact is that we are also seeing the emergence of a new geography. When I was born, I had an ocean called the Indian Ocean. That was our ocean. Now we are living in a world which has the Indo-Pacific. Now, and this seems to be gaining currency. The political geography is now beginning to dominate the natural geography, which lends the question that will India have to rethink some of its own internal arrangements? Which regions are more important to engage with the Indo-Pacific? Is the Mumbai Marine Lines as central to India's Indo-Pacific future? Which are the new trading hubs that we will need to invest in if we need to capture this new emergence? Are we thinking about those new dimensions that we will have to invest into?
Samir, from the time when you were born and you looked at your ocean, there are now many more ships sailing in that ocean. But I think probably when your grandfather was born, maybe when your father was born, actually even that ocean was a little different. I mean, I referred to it in my book, which was, think of it, the British, in fact, not just the British, the Portuguese with a base in Goa went all the way to Macau and Japan. Okay, the British with India as their sort of fortress again went all the way up and all the way sort of beyond. So the fact was, between the Pacific Ocean and the Indian Ocean, there wasn't a hard divide, even conceptually. The hard divide happened after the Second World War, when the United States in particular established its very strong dominance on East Asia. You had the Second World War and the importance of Japan, the America-China relationship, the Korean War, then the Vietnam War, all of which actually kind of created a military strategic divide between the Indian Ocean and Pacific Ocean. We started thinking of it very differently. Now, when you move into a multipolar world, and I'm sorry if I keep coming back to that, what today people find is, it's not like you have so many forces, you have something out there in Indian Ocean which is different from something out there in Pacific. You find that you need to deploy your assets across. And it's not just an American problem. Look at it from our point of view, and I'll come to the States part of it. The bulk of our trade till 25 years ago was with the West. We used to go westward of India. Okay. Now, after 25 years since 1992, more than half our trade goes eastward of India. Okay. Now, if it goes eastward of India, you can't stay with the same theoretical construct or strategic construct which you had before. If your key partners today are in the Pacific, clearly and your interests, therefore, are more and more in that direction. And as I said, the capabilities of all the players are changing. Then the Indo-Pacific comes into being. My argument is Indo-Pacific is actually not a bold concept which is going to drive reality. It is an explanation for a reality which has already happened in the last 10, 15 years. Now, what does it do to India? I mean, it's very interesting. If you look at Indian history, and I know this is a very, very sweeping statement to make. India's moments of greatness was when Eastern India was very prosperous, very vibrant, when in many ways it was a sort of like the center of the overall Indian civilization space. And if you look at the colonial period, they were the people most impacted by colonial rule. I mean, if you look at the pillaging of India, which was that period of colonial rule, the bulk of the pillaging actually happened in Eastern India. Now, what Indo-Pacific and Act East and other forces which are going to pull us eastward will do is, it'll make sense today to build ports on the eastern seaboard. And again, I would argue, look at the last 15 years, that is already happening. It will make sense today for us to start thinking of our geographical advantages there. We have actually not used the full value of our Northeast. I think that has changed today. I mean, the whole outlook in the Northeast is fundamentally different in the last few years. And even, if you look at our relationship with Bangladesh and with Myanmar, if the more we actually connect with our immediate Eastern neighbors, you're actually opening up a much broader avenue of economic interaction. So I would hope that the marine lines in Mumbai remain important, but I suspect that you're going to get a lot of new sort of trade lines, as it were, in many Eastern Indian cities.
Great. Since we've gone east already, let me ask you about Japan. How significant is the stepping down of Prime Minister Abe for health reasons, bilateral between India and Japan? And is Indian partnership, we hear about America far more often because we read English newspapers and English media, but is a partnership with India, a strong strategic partnership with India in the true sense, a Japanese consensus? You know the country quite intimately. Is there a consensus in Japan on the Abe formula for India? Do you think that we are beginning to touch the levels of partnership with Japan that perhaps you would desire?
Well, I would say the short answer to your question, is there a broad consensus in Japan about the direction in which Prime Minister Abe took it? I mean, would the policy outlive Prime Minister Abe? That's a question you're asking me. My sense is yes. I think what he did during his tenure, and I think he was remarkable in this respect, was the kind of attention and the persistence with which he sort of pushed this relationship. My own sense is it has today a very, very strong foundation. And I would say, in all fairness, because it was reciprocated in equal measure on the Indian side, especially by Prime Minister Modi, it's today, I don't have worries about the relationship. Okay. Still, I mean, he was an extraordinary figure, and no question, we will miss him like so many others. But what does the Japan relationship mean to us? Look, number one, if you look at the history of Asia, modern history of Asia, Japan has been the pioneer of modernization. It was with the Meiji Restoration, it was the growth of the industrial Japan. In fact, it was Japan's defeat of Russia in 1905, which in many ways, Indian nationalists took as a kind of a sign of, Asia's ability to revive itself. And Japan has not only been a pioneer, Japan in many ways has also been something of a model. That it has built its own capacities, and it has also had a very, very energetic presence in the world trading system. When you asked me the earlier question, which is Atmanirbhar Bharat in contradiction with global value chains and international economy. Look at Japan. I mean, Japan's had an Atmanirbhar Japan for 150 years. Okay, so I would in fact look at Japan and say there are aspects of their model. I mean, clearly they are very unique, and I mean that way we are unique too. There are aspects of their model which has learnings for India, and how to build your manufacturing, how to strategize, how to engage in the global value chain and actually bring your capability to bear. And because I didn't address that in the earlier question. I mean, to me, Atmanirbhar Bharat means building the capacity to have a stronger hand when you go out in the world.
Okay.
Now, there is a third element, which is if you look at who are our partners, who can today directly drive the post-COVID recovery, the recovery, resilience, reform bit which I've spoken about. I think Japan would be to me one of the countries right up there, and they are a country with a record. I mean, if you think back at what difference the Maruti Suzuki introduction made, not to the auto industry, to the entire lifestyle of a Indian generation. Look today at how much of a difference the Delhi metro makes. I mean, if the metro comes to a halt, Delhi today comes to a halt, and not just Delhi. I mean, what was seen, I was in the embassy when the metro agreement was signed. At that time, you had to convince people that, look, this is going to be relevant, this is going to be important. Today, every big Indian city would like a metro. So we have the bullet train project. I think when the bullet train comes, I mean, anybody who's traveled in the bullet train in Japan or in China or in Europe will realize, I mean, what a profound transformation that brings. I mean, the bullet train is not about traveling. It is, I mean, the sort of the ripple impact of it is so enormous. It's bigger than the project itself. So I think today the Japan relationship is very different. It's got enormous potential. I would like to see us having a high ambition on that relationship.
I am going to move into the rapid fire round now in the old television format. I have been bombarded by 6 or 7 questions. I'm going to give you 30 seconds to 45 seconds for every question. Very interesting ones. I'm going to combine some of them. There are 2 questions which add up to is the Indian democracy ahead of the government in global relations? How can government use its bubbling mood of the street for scaling its ambitions? And the second part to this question is, how can the corporate sector in India assist the government in building stronger foreign policy maneuvers in this changing world?
Rapid response, I think it matters a lot that we are well regarded today as a democracy built under most challenging conditions. I think people trust us in a post-COVID world where trust and resiliency, dependability are going to be very important. I think a strong democracy at home is going to be definitely an asset for foreign policy. Rapid response on corporate sector, absolutely. Corporate sector will contribute directly to our capabilities. It will help, it can change employment, it can create demands, it can create capabilities. As I said, it can enhance our reputation abroad. And it can actually facilitate the flow of Indian talent to the global economy, because it's in our interest to make world not only a marketplace but a workplace.
So we have left out a very important continent, and I'll probably give you a minute for this answer. In the 1.5 years that you've been a minister, you have invested more in EU and Europe than perhaps any of your predecessors. It's an old continent. It's divided, right? I mean, East and West, North and South. They can't agree on immigration. They can't agree on data economy. They can't agree on China. Why are you so enamored by them? And certainly, in that sense, your special agreement with Denmark on the green agreement with EU on green with Denmark, and this whole climate agenda. What is your assessment of what that relationship offers? And is India ready to be a green champion alongside the EU, Denmark, and other partners within the grouping in the days ahead?
Well, I'm enamored of anybody who can be of use to me. Okay? Apart from which I like them. Huh? Now, they can be of use to me because if you look today at the challenges of India, and I spoke not just of recovering to where we are, look ahead. Okay? I would like to see a green India. I would like to see a digital India. I would like to see us, a much more innovative, skilled India. Now, if you look today, where are resources, where are markets, where is technology, where are best practices? I would suggest to you many of these roads that may not lead to Rome, but they lead to Europe as a whole, of which Rome is a part. So the point is that there is a lot that we can gain. And the second is, look, Europe had, after 2008, gone into a fortress, Europe mentality. They had kind of put their economic interests so directly ahead of the strategic one that they had pulled back. I think it was important to get them to understand that you can't really sort of separate the two, and you would see, and I'm not suggesting it is my activity, but you will see there is a revival of European interest in Asia. I mean, Germany has just announced its Indo-Pacific strategy. France has announced its Indo-Pacific strategy. EU has announced its India strategy. So, I would like to think that all the efforts put in have not been wasted, that I've certainly got their attention. And, even a country like Denmark, since you mentioned it, look at the green capabilities of Denmark. A lot of our issues today, recycling issues, circular economy issues, pollution issues, there are technologies and proven capabilities out there.
So we have 2 minutes, and I have two questions for you. Both are very simple. The first, of course, is where is the smart money on the US elections? What are your predictions? And how will the outcome change the politics of Asia and indeed the world? And second, of course, is in 2 years we turn 75. Every country, every community needs stories, narratives that define them. What is that storyline that you are working towards as we move to 75? So the US elections and the Indian story at 75. You have 2 minutes, sir.
Well, the first one is easy. I don't know where the smart money is, but I think the smart thinking is to keep your own counsel. On where India is at 75, look, you yourself brought up democracy. I think India at 75 needs to send out that message of we build democracy under the most challenging conditions. We today have shown we built development also under equally challenging conditions, not just build development, that we are moving towards a much more human-centric view of economic progress. I think we also need to send out a message that the rise of India is not, India will never have an us versus the world mentality. That the rise of India is good for the world, we will contribute for the world, that there will be issues where we will share, we will be generous, and I think, the pandemic was a very good opportunity. And most of all, I think my message at India at 75 would be, if we can show them our creativity, our talent, our energy, our dynamism, I think that's the quality. It's the energy of India, the buzz about India, which attracts the world. And I'm very, very confident we'll be able to do that.
Creativity, energy, and buzz. And that is, in some sense, the cue to hand it back to Ishteyaque, because all of those three virtues belong in the corporate sector in abundance. So, Ishteyaque, over to you to make that happen.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, Samir. Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. I think we probably could not have asked for a more profound and befitting conclusion of 2 days of deliberations. It gave us so much to think, so much to act upon, and we are so overwhelmed that the best justice that I can do to conclude this entire national forum is to just by saying thank you to all the panelists here. And more than that, I would like to thank you, the esteemed members of PAFI. We are just as good as our membership is. And you continue to really push us and continue to inspire us to do better. I also wanted to thank you, our sponsors and our partners, the PAFI team, which is led by our own Lakshmi, IAMI team that is led by Sandeep, which provided us a wonderful platform here and really made it almost like a hitch-free or any issue-free 2 days of virtual session, the management committee, and of course our own Mr. Ajay Khanna, the forum chairman and co-founder of PAFI. Thank you very much. I hope you've all enjoyed the session. I really wanted to thank you, Honorable Minister, for concluding the session with so much of a profound conversation. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.